the end of it. You know two components of it already. Fire truck and then part one of the radio system. The third component would be the final component of the radio system. The council could direct us to do that if the council so desires.
That third part would have to come back to us anyway because it's over $50,000. So in the end result, we're still going to know exactly. We approved this going forward with the two little additional parts of information that are on this. I mean, this is no different than what we've done before, except we've added a third step of a financing option. So, I mean, we have allocated in the past millions of dollars for things because you have to put it in the budget and prove that you can pay for it first before you go out to any vendor to say, hey, we've actually got the money to pay for this. Now let's start negotiating on the contract, and then the contract comes back and we say, yes or no. I don't see anything different about this except the financing agent.
And it's pretty standard procedure. HUD uses it as well. We have,
actually,
we've done
private business.
Yes.
And you have to have the money before you can go into it.
It's just a not to exceed amount. It's just a funding source. It is not saying that we're spending the $1.9 million.
Thank you for that clarification.
I think that there was not in the motion that was made and approved, that there was not a specific rate included. It was just come back to us and tell us what that lower rate is going to be.
Yes.
So that lower rate can be 2.99%.
So the agreements wouldn't be signed until the rates are agreed upon or changed in the document.
The problem is that this was approved just now. It was approved. So we have the rate at 3%, and the motion that was made was to come back to us and tell us what that new lower rate will be. It doesn't. There was nothing that says come back with a rate at 0.5% or 1%. It was come back and tell us what the new lower rate's going to be. That means anything below 3%.
It was based on what they could do.
But that information wasn't given. We need to remember that language has meaning. And we're getting what staff is going to give us.
Then I would suggest you make an additional motion and let us vote on it and put it in the minutes.
Council, my understanding of the motion was that we were supposed to come back, or staff's supposed to come back with a cancellation amount, but the notes are supposed to be modified to be either the LAIF or the money market rate. And the notes need to reflect not to exceed that amount. And so those two changes would need to be made to the notes, and because of that, you'll also get an additional schedule of loan repayments.
So the funding source then is not approved yet until it comes back to us for that approval with the additional information.
The motion I heard approved the funding source at those amounts, but having to adjust the interest rate and to make sure the note said not to exceed. That we can bring it back to you. You guys can make a motion to reconsider your item. But I know, at least I took it, that I'm going to have to go back and revise the notes with Lorena to do those three things. That's an accurate assessment of your motion. It is with me, though. Okay. We ready to move on to our next item?
Thank you, Mayor. So tonight we'll be going over the proposed fiscal year 2020-2021 budget. You'll recall that the bulk of the presentation here before you is similar to what we saw at the last council meeting. Clay did pass out a couple replacement pages. They don't change the budget scenario. One was an error that was on my part, which had to do with a a personnel listing classification that was improperly included to begin with, so we've highlighted that. And so you should be able to look through the document and see where that change is made. And also it showed up in the department page and it also showed up in the citywide personnel listing, and so we've highlighted that for your information. So just as we started the last council meeting, I wanted to spend some time talking about the year in review and some of the highlights that we've accomplished over the last year. As you can see online and as well as on your agenda packet, we've implemented a new agenda management system. We have hired brand new HR staff, completely revamping that operation in that division. We've hired a new police chief and a community development director. We've utilized LCW for personnel and labor legal support. We've enhanced the use of social media. We've had over 200,000 engagements in just the last 2 months. We've restarted the city's PEG channel. We are in the middle of the migration to the JPIA for enhanced risk management. We've completed the LED streetlight project. And we've completed the police department station retrofits. In terms of CIP projects, we've completed a number of projects. We've successfully completed the following CIP projects, including the Kirby Street improvements from Devonshire to Menlo. Completed the 2018-2019 slurry seal project. We've completed the 2017-2018 slurry seal project. We've completed the 2018-2019 missing sidewalk links project. And then finally, we've completed the Stetson Bridge replacement project that was many years in the making. So this was all done by the staff that we have. I'd like to thank the staff for their leadership in making sure that these projects were completed. You'll notice that the bulk of the CIP projects, you can see that many of them are from years past, but based on some changes that we made in engineering, we were able to complete a number of those projects this fiscal year. So I wanted to start with some background on the city's budget and the budget situation that the city finds itself in. In July of 2015, the California State Auditor informed the city of Hemet that it had been selected for review under the High Risk Local Government Agency Audit Program. The program authorizes the state auditor to identify local government agencies that are at high risk for potential waste, fraud, abuse, or mismanagement, or that have major challenges associated with their economy, efficiency, or effectiveness. In August of 2016, the state auditor released their report, which stated the following: Hemet is a high-risk city due to its financial and organizational risks. Specifically, Hemet's budget deficit has persisted for many years, and our projection indicates that it will continue through at least fiscal year 2019-20, raising concerns about the city's ability to fund its services. Although the city developed a 5-year plan to address its deficit, inaccurate information and overly optimistic assumptions distort the validity of the city's projection. In addition, we've identified inefficiencies in the city's management. So I know that we talked about budget. I know that we talked about Measure U. I know that we talked about the challenges that we have. Very well documented, and these items have persisted for many years now. So the state auditors provided a October 2019 update, and the update states in part the following. In June of 2019, the City Council approved Hemet's fiscal year 2019-2020 budget, due in part to a transfer to the general fund of $1.2 million of its Measure U revenue, in addition of 1 cent to the sales tax that voters approved in 2016 to raise funds for public safety. Hemet balanced its general fund budget. Although Measure U is a general tax that the city can use for any purpose, the City Council adopted a non-binding resolution that the city may only use Measure U proceeds to fund its public safety costs. The city also set up a Measure U oversight board to ensure that the city uses the funds for their intended purpose. Without several other smaller transfers from other city funds and the Measure U transfer to offset public safety costs, Hemet's general fund budgeted expenditures would have exceeded its revenues. So in the current fiscal year that we're in, we actually had a pretty grim budget scenario last year, and this scenario has persisted for multiple years. And so even in the current year that we're in, without the use of $1.2 million of Measure U funding, which was relayed to the community as new and enhanced levels of service, the city would have been unable to meet or balance the city's budget without that $1.2 million. Part of what the state auditor recommended that the city of Hemet do is develop a 5-year financial projection model that really incorporated revenues and expenditures for the city of Hemet. As you can see in the graphs showed on the screen, every time you see a purple arrow, that scenario shows the instance where expenditures outpace your revenues, creating that structural deficit problem. On January 28, 2020, the staff presented a financial model to the City of Hemet Mayor and City Council and the community that illustrated the revenues and expenditures for the upcoming years. Based on the existing expenditure trends and the revenue trends from January 28th, we projected that we would have significant budget deficits for at least the next 5 years. We also made it very clear in that presentation that any change in the local economy would completely throw off that financial model. As a result of COVID-19 hitting, that reality came a lot sooner than any of us really expected. So we talk about fund balances in the general fund. We talk about one-time fund balances. What has happened and what has continued the city's current service operation levels has been the utilization of one-time revenues to fund existing operations. And because of that pattern and because of that trend, we find ourselves in a very difficult budget situation that was only made worse by COVID-19. Back in March, I believe it was, or maybe it was April, I provided an overview to the City Council and the community on what our budgeting approach would be for the upcoming fiscal year. Each department and each division was giving a limit for all maintenance and operation and personnel costs for the city. So what we did was we used our financial model that we provided to the mayor and the city council, and we projected our revenues for the upcoming fiscal year starting in January. Based on those revenues that were projected for the upcoming fiscal year, we allocated those revenues throughout general fund operations, including public safety, police and fire, community development, engineering, human resources, city clerk, information technology, and every single operation within the city of Hemet. Based on that budget target, departments and divisions needed to make different allocations to their operations and needed to make changes to be within, to have a balanced budget by the end of this project. Based on the projections or the targets that were provided, departments evaluated their current and projected service levels and built their programs and budget from zero or from the ground up. So what we had was a little bit of a blend of a zero-based budgeting approach as well as a targeted-based budgeting approach for the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget. Based on the review that was conducted by departments and divisions, each department was required to break down their program and their division with all expenditures justified. So they had their dollar amount that they were allocated based on the targets that we expected in the current fiscal year, or the upcoming fiscal year, and they built their budgets utilizing those targets. During this process, all departments submitted their preliminary numbers and budgets from the targets provided. One key issue that came up during this whole process was COVID-19. So the targets of revenues that were provided to all operations did not anticipate COVID-19, as the budget directions were provided prior to COVID-19 closures. So we had created our financial model, we had created this budget process before COVID-19 had hit, and so we were left with having to revise those revenues based on what was happening in Hemet's local economy and the larger regional economy. The initial proposed budgets included reductions in FTE vacant positions. So even prior to reworking the budget based on the COVID-19 scenario, we were already going to propose the elimination of vacant FTE positions to make the budget work. As a result of the revised revenue estimates that we worked with private consultants, city staff, and every single department and operation in the city, all departments were required to reduce their budgets by 10% based on the COVID-19 pandemic and anticipated lowered revenues as a result of COVID-19. So now I'd like to spend some time talking about COVID-19 and the impacts to our operation. The mayor and the council have already seen this, but I think this is really good information for those that may be viewing or haven't seen this information. Our greatest source of general fund revenue is sales tax, which has seen a steep decline due to the restrictions implemented because of COVID-19. The decline in local consumer spending habits has had a detrimental impact on our businesses, which then directly impacts our ability to fund critical operations within our community. Sharp and immediate declines in sales tax, transit occupancy tax, and various other revenue line items in fiscal year 1920 have taken its toll, but our fiscal year 2020-2021 proposed budget anticipates a recovery as our businesses continue to reopen. Based on leading economists, experts, and a newly released report prepared by the Southern California Association of Governments, otherwise known as SCAG, titled Potential Impacts of COVID-19 in the SCAG region, the collective analysis shows that the region may experience between a 38% to 48% reduction in motor vehicle and parts dealers, a 35 to 48% reduction in gasoline stations, and a 53% to 65% reduction in food services and drinking places through December 2021. As you can see, these types of businesses are the very kind of bulk of what we have that produces sales tax for our community. So based on that analysis conducted by SCAG, you can see that these impacts will have deep ramifications for our city's budget. The analysis conducted by SCAG utilized actual data for calendar year 2019 aggregated from the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration. Their report assumed the reopening of the economy similar to what we are currently experiencing now. And for the city of Hemet, we have assumed a gradual increase in local economic activity beginning at the end of May and continuing into June, and continued growth as we move further into the summer. I know there's a number of reports that have come out in the last week or so that project continued growth moving forward, but no report that I have seen or read says that we will reach pre-COVID-19 economic levels by the end of the upcoming fiscal year. Information from the State Employment Development Department shows that unemployment for the month of April 2020 reached 18.6% in the city of Hemet. For May 2020, Hemet unemployment reached 18.8%. So you can see that in the most recent updated information from EDD, we still saw an increase of unemployment in May 2020 in our specific figure. This alarming figure reflects another key element from the SCAG report. Our community has a significant number of individuals employed in sectors hit particularly hard by the pandemic. This unemployment number may further alter spending habits within our community, so one key element of recovery includes the re-entering of our citizens into gainful employment. The reason I included the first slide is because in the staff report, I made mention of I believe it was a Yale report that clearly show a correlation between consumer spending habits and unemployment. So, as we see unemployment in our community at 18.8%, we can safely assume that those spending habits of those individuals will probably change, reducing further the local economic impact or local economic activity within our community. So during this COVID-19, we spent a significant amount of time refining revenues, reviewing revenues, talking to experts, and talking to as many individuals as we could. I'd like to thank the staff, primarily the finance department, and every single operation in the city of Emmett that was involved in these conversations. We took year-to-date actual information in terms of revenues that we had actually collected, and we went through every single line item to determine how different they were based on what the council approved in the fiscal year 1920 budget. We prepared our own projections, and they were validated by our revenue consultant. Our expenditures for the current fiscal year remain slightly under budget due to numerous vacancies across the agency. In addition, in order to directly grapple with the projected deficit for the current year, under my direction, the executive team took immediate actions to provide expenditure reductions for the remainder of this fiscal year. And I'll be honest, they were not popular, they were not comfortable, and I did not relish the fact of what we had to do to help lower our expenditures for this fiscal year. Again, while by no means popular or easy, these actions were necessary to ensure flexibility moving forward. Given our revised revenue projections, combined with our aggressive cost control measures and existing expenditure levels, we estimate a shortfall of approximately $1 million for fiscal year 1920. This shortfall can be made up using one-time reserve funding, and we will bring this item back to council in the future once we have that specific dollar amount of how much we will need to dip into one-time reserve funding to make this budget work for the existing fiscal year that we are in. So now we'll spend some time going over the fiscal year 2020-2021 revenues. These have been updated. Measure U has been excluded from this specific slide. So based on the last conversation we had with the mayor and the city council, you can see that in the yellow items, we had information that was conveyed to us from the county, which was a benefit to the city of Hemet, because we actually saw an increase in property taxes and intergovernmental revenues for us. That had a positive impact to our budget, and so as a result, we were able to add in positions that were slated for reduction and elimination back into the budget. And so the council can expect for at least a quarterly review of revenues and expenditures. I know that we already do that as it stands, but the council should be prepared for more conversations and more refinements moving forward as we get actual numbers that come in for the city of Hemet. Our projected general fund revenues total approximately $39.0 million, which estimates an increase from revised fiscal year 1920 revenue estimates. These refined revenues reflect our best estimates rooted in year-to-date actuals, discussions with the management team, and projections from HDL, who is our sales tax consultant as well as property tax consultant as well. This also assumes the gradual reopening that we are beginning to see across the state, but it does not assume or consider a potential secondary shutdown. That scenario would significantly change the numbers provided before the mayor and the city council. And just as we would revise revenues for increases in our favor, we would obviously need to include information to the council when revenues come in lower, and expect that we would have to take action, or expect that the council take action to revise the budget to align expenditures with revenues moving forward. prior to COVID-19, the management team was taking an aggressive approach to align expenditures with revenues projected for fiscal year 2020, 2021, and presented to the mayor and the city council in the financial model presentation on January 28, 2020. So the individuals that may be listening in can go to the January 28, 2020 meeting of the mayor and the city council and pull up the financial model and really see that financial picture moving forward. This model, which specifically stated that any change in the local economy would create a different fiscal reality, was soon outdated given the financial consequences of COVID-19. So now we'll spend some time going over the fiscal year 2020-2021 reduction methodology. And before I get started, this has been one of the most difficult tasks and items that I've had to do in my time here in the city of Hemet. I think I speak on behalf of every single member of the executive team when I state that these reductions were by no means easy. These were by no means things that we were proud of, but I wanted to give a glimpse to the public as well as the council as to what we did to come up with the reductions moving forward and what's included in the city's budget. So the following core concepts guided the preparation of the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget. Priority was placed on retaining existing public safety personnel. An emphasis was placed on retaining planning and development staff, which are critical to economic development in our community. Basic or minimum levels of public works staff were maintained. An emphasis on maintaining core programs and services was put forward. And we emphasized the reorganization of departments and divisions to achieve budgetary savings and streamline operations. I should note that even before COVID-19 hit, we were planning on having a reorganization of different departments and different divisions as a result of the need to realign our operations, because the current organization of the city of Hemet has been in existence for probably over a decade. We really needed to refine how we conduct our operations, and it's something that the council has consistently advocated for over the course of the year, that we cannot keep doing things the same way and expect the same results. And so again, we placed priority on doing these actions and make sure that we were essentially changing things up and continuing to move forward on the very much needed changes that we needed for this organization. The proposed budget does not include the use of its emergency reserve to fund ongoing expenditures. If our revenues do not come in as expected, the council should expect additional strategies to align expenditures with revenues, including future additional reductions. The use of one-time revenues is not proposed, as this past practice has led to the city's current fiscal condition. As stated by the state auditor, expenditures have exceeded revenues for the last number of years, and as a result, it has resulted in a lowered fund balance in the general fund to fund operations moving forward. A total of 53.1 FTE positions have been identified for elimination in the proposed fiscal year 2020-2021 budget. The bulk of these reductions are in vacant positions. The budget recommends the funding of existing police and fire personnel for Measure U in lieu of carrying vacant positions or implementing new programs. So we reprioritized the Measure U program to ensure that we did not impact any boots on the ground, and we retained those individuals. If the city council chooses to add additional personnel in public safety, the city would need to allocate that funding from fund balance, which is one-time funding, and we'll talk about the decline in fund balance in the Measure U operation that has occurred in just a year from the last time we had a budget conversation with the mayor and the city council. A priority has been placed on retaining existing personnel to the fullest extent possible. Proposed layoffs in the fire department and police department total 0. Additional reductions are required should the council choose not to allocate funding for Measure U to cover these public safety costs. Now we will spend some time talking about the proposed fiscal year 2020-2021 general fund expenditures, and for the sake of the conversation, Measure U has been excluded. Included in the budget document that is included in the agenda backup, you will note the following items have been included in the budget. A 10% reduction across the agency, 6% salary increases for police, increase in retiree health costs, cost increases for PERS, increases for contracts for software maintenance, increases in contract costs across the agency. Those are various different agreements that we have. We have the consolidation of Public Works and Engineering included in the budget. We have the creation of the Administrative Services Department. We have comp time expenses that are included for PD. We have included funding for public safety in the general fund, so we're utilizing Measure U to cover existing public safety personnel that we recommend we utilize general Measure U to fund in lieu of removing those positions. We have our 20% emergency reserve. We have also included enhanced customer service levels in the water utility. We have also included the conversion to the JPIA and reduced workers' compensation costs. We have included changes in the Public Works Department in terms of reporting structures and staffing allocations throughout the Public Works Department, and we've done those to save positions and shift personnel again to save positions, and that's the only reason we did a lot of these changes. We have included 2020 election costs, and finally we have included costs for city surplus land processes, that items that may come up in the city's budget or in the process of delving down surplusing city-owned property. The following items were not included in the proposed fiscal year 2020-2021 budget: cost of living adjustments for non-safety personnel, classification and compensation study for non-safety personnel, the replacement of the telephone system, private security for library or city hall, and I should note that there was an allocation from CDBG that was included previously. That's not a general fund allocation, but it is included moving forward. We do not have consolidated grant management. I know the council has talked about that, and I know that I've had some follow-up conversations with Councilmember Wright on that. It does not include proactive mobile home inspection staff. It does not include an economic development program. And finally, it does not include special event grant allocations in the budget. So you should note that the table that's in front of you includes some changes in the budget based on some changes that happened that the council approved at the last council meeting, including the deferment of the 6% increase for members of the Hemet Firefighters Association, as well as 2 individuals that will be utilizing the early retirement incentive offered by the city in the fire department. We were able to add a fire prevention position in the budget, as well as allocate the staffing that would have been otherwise removed in the fire department, and ensure that there are no reductions in the fire department based on boots on the ground and individuals that are currently employed by the city of Hemet. We have also updated library positions. There was one potential reduction that was included in the previous budget. Based on the refined revenues information that we received from the county, we have plugged that position back into the library budget. And in addition to that, I know that the council had some concerns about some potential engineering contract costs for items that may come up. We have added an allocation for that in case we have a specific study that comes up that needs to be conducted. So we have plugged back in some engineering funding for that specific item. You'll note that our proposed reserve amount is about 21.5%. You will also note that we have a surplus of $405 that will be added to the general fund uncommitted fund balance. I should also note that any increase in expenditures on the general fund side requires an additional allocation of general fund emergency reserve fund balance. So hypothetically speaking, if our general fund expenditures would be $100 million based on the council resolution that specifies our reserve amount, we would be entitled to reserve 20% of that, or $20 million. The only reason that we're able to make that emergency reserve amount is because our expenditures are far lower than what they were last year. So, if the council chose to increase expenditures for the general fund side, the council would potentially not be able to meet its general fund emergency reserve requirements set forth by council resolution. So now we will spend some time going over the departments and a review of the operations moving forward. With respect to the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget for the city manager, the city clerk, and the city council office, in the city manager's office, we are proposing the elimination of the assistant city manager position, and we are recommending that we replace that with an assistant to the city manager position that is a lower cost, that will help provide some additional staff support and staff help in the city manager's office. We have also eliminated the conference budget in our office. In the city clerk's office, we have shifted half of an FTE, and we've split that person between two different operations, so that individual will be working on between two different operations. In the city council office, we've reduced training and education in the budget, as well as eliminated the computer purchases that were programmed in this year that we were able to complete based on the transition and the migration of some of the IT systems that we're nearing the completion of for this fiscal year. So we don't need that allocation moving forward. We have proposed the consolidation of the we have put forward the recommendation of the creation of the Administrative Services Department, the consolidation of Human Resources, IT, and Finance. We have retained and plugged back in the HR manager position based on council discussion that we had at the last council meeting. We have eliminated the GIS specialist position, which is a vacant position. We have also restored the accountant position based on input from the council and concerns about accounting policies and making sure that we're doing the best that we can to do the items that have been noted in previous audits. We have funded an office specialist position from a full-time FTE to a half-time FTE. We have reduced training and conference budgets, and we have also reduced software, contracts, materials, and supplies in IT. In the 2019 updated state auditor report that was provided in October of 2019, the state auditor again references, we further recommend in our report that the city reorganize its government structure in order to better align similar functions and provide opportunities to leverage staff resources. And I have to say that I agree with this recommendation fully. In the police department, we have a total of 107.6 FTEs that are included in the budget. We are proposing the deletion of 16 vacant sworn positions and 9.6 vacant non-sworn positions in the police department. The proposed fiscal year 2020-2021 budget does not propose the elimination of any filled police department positions. So all police department personnel that we currently have right now will remain with the city of Hemet. In the fire department, we have proposed the deletion of 6 vacant fire positions. We have reduced materials and supplies. We have added 1 fire prevention officer, and we've added 2 floaters to the city's budget. So the proposed fiscal year 2020-2021 budget proposes 4 station staffing and a medic squad at Station 5 and no elimination of fire department personnel. I should add that the floaters concept was something that I've had discussions with Chief Brown, with the HFFA group, and we believe that this concept will have the potential of reducing overtime. So in lieu of, and just so individuals that may not be familiar with this concept, if we have a individual in the fire department that calls in sick or takes a vacation, instead of having a forced overtime situation, what these floaters will do is they will not be assigned to one specific fire station. They will report to duty every day on their respective shift, and based on vacancies that pop up throughout that day or throughout that shift, they will be assigned to plug whatever personnel is vacant for that day in lieu of forcing overtime. So I know that that's something that the Measure U Oversight Committee has stated, and that's something that the City Council has stated, solutions for dealing with the overtime situation in the fire department, and we believe that this concept will help yield that moving forward. This concept is employed by other agencies, and it's, at one point previously the city did employ this concept and this idea in years past. In Public Works, we are proposing the consolidation of Public Works and Engineering. This will generate some savings for the City of Hemet. We have proposed, in lieu of having a city engineering director and a Public Works director, that we have one director that oversees both operations. In the engineering division, we are, and this is the area that we are having some workforce reductions with personnel and filled positions, the deletion of 1 field administrative assistant position, contracts for professional services as needed. We have included the cost to shift and relocate the staff from Covell to City Hall, because I know that we've talked about, and the council has talked about, consolidating our operations and ensuring that the development community has the best opportunity to talk to community development and engineering without having to go across the street. So we have included the migration of engineering into City Hall. And we are proposing the elimination and deletion of the city engineer position. On the Public Works side, we have a number of changes, again, done solely for the sake of saving personnel and ensuring that we have no reductions in force in the Public Works Department. So we have shifted 1 maintenance worker 2 from the Parks Division. We are reducing Parks Watering by 30%. In the Streets Division, we will be shifting 8 employees from the division to the water utility. We have reduced maintenance and operations by 25%. In the facilities operation, we are deleting 1 technician position, and we are restructuring the Public Works Administration operation to minimize duplication, to minimize redundancies, and to provide we believe, an enhanced level of customer service based on the consolidation of departments. I should note that the shifting of positions from streets was necessary due to deficit spending in the streets operation. Deficit spending over years that depleted almost all of its funds and left it in a very precarious situation. So again, the concept of utilizing one-time funds to fund ongoing operations is clearly exhibited when we have this scenario here where we're having to right-size that and move employees around in lieu of workforce reductions because of the pattern of deficit spending, one-time use of reserve funds for ongoing expenditures. In the library, we are proposing no reductions in existing personnel. We have proposed reductions to maintenance and operations. And we do have a reduction in a vacant position in the library. The fiscal year 2020-2021 budget maintains current library staffing. In community development, we have included the deletion of one field community development specialist, and we have proposed the deletion of 2 vacant positions. One of the items with respect to community development is, over the course of a number of years, the city has added numerous administrative functions and numerous administrative positions to the tune of every code officer has their own administrative assistant. As a result of that, and based on the reduction in vacant code officer positions, we are proposing the elimination of one of those community development specialist positions because of that. I can state that in my operation, the city manager's office, we have one admin assistant or one administrative support staff member. We felt that in the community development department, the administrative assistance was particularly heavy, and in lieu of the reductions in vacant positions, that we would be able to shift the personnel or shift the work to the existing personnel in that operation. And again, I should reiterate that when it comes to the private sector, these are some of the areas that oftentimes are done in order to reduce redundancies, increase efficiencies, and obviously, we believe, increase effectiveness moving forward. In fiscal year 2020-2021, General Fund Measure U revenues and expenditures, the total revenues that we project for Measure U total about $10.3 million. We will be utilizing, or we are recommending the use of $684,000 of Measure U fund balance in lieu of the deletion or the potential reductions in force of existing public safety personnel. The total number, or the total expenditures for Measure U operations totals just under $11 million at $10.99 million. You can see that in the table below, at the beginning fund balance of the Measure U fund at the beginning of this fiscal year was approximately $11.7 million. As a result of the decline in revenues, increased expenditures, including overtime, including the allocation of fund balance for capital purchases, including a fire truck apparatus, as well as the purchasing of a radio system, we presented to the mayor and the city council the use of Measure U fund balance for those purchases. In just that time, in just about a year's time, we've seen our fund balance and the Measure U fund balance go from about $11.7 million to about $6.4 million. So I mentioned this at the last council meeting, and I should mention it again, that I know that the council has taken a lot of flack for having a high Measure U fund balance, but had it not been for that high fund balance and some of those, I'll call them savings account, or that savings account that was generated from that, that's allowed us to transition some of the existing personnel to that fund and really go by and escape this budget without any impacts in terms of reductions in personnel in the police and fire department. So I think that should be noted. So we believe and we expect and we project as we continue to move forward that the fund balance in Measure U will be approximately $6.4 million. We are proposing the use of $684,000 of that fund balance for existing operations, which leaves us with approximately 52% of our expenditures in Measure U reserves. If you look at the budget, you will note that in the police and fire Measure U budgets, a line item titled newly funded expenditures is included. This reflects a shift from previous priorities to one maximizing the number of personnel that remain employed. So what I mean by that is we have not included a number of vacant, or we have not carried a number of vacant positions in Measure U. We have not included new programs in Measure U because the only funding source for those programs would be one-time monies. So essentially, if, let's say hypothetically, the city council said we wanted to include 5 new police officer positions in the budget, the only way that we would be able to fund those positions is with one-time savings account. There is no reoccurring revenues there, and so we could project out, based on that expenditure, the number of years that we would be able to have those individuals employed before we would run out of money for them, because it is not a replenishing fund in terms of one-time monies or the use of fund balance. While some vacancies do exist in current Measure U budgets, the recommendation is to prioritize filled positions versus planning for new recruitments or new programs. It should be noted that fund balance above the reserve amount is proposed to cover numerous positions in public safety to minimize additional reductions in force. Ongoing expenditures should not be programmed using one-time monies, but this is being done under the condition that eventual retirements, natural attrition, and a steady flow of ongoing revenue will allow those employees to be shifted back to the general fund. I'm nearing the end of my presentation, so bear with me as we wrap up the last part of this presentation. In the state auditor report that was provided to the City of Hemet, as well as provided to the state agencies that receive their authority to do this work, they noted in their report that Hemet is a high-risk city due to its financial and organizational risks. Specifically, Hemet's budget deficit has persisted for many years, and our projection indicates that it will continue through at least fiscal year 1920, raising concerns about the city's ability to fund its services. Although the city developed a 5-year plan to address its deficit, inaccurate information and overly optimistic assumptions distort the validity of the city's projection. In addition, we identified inefficiencies in the city's management. In the independent audit conducted by an independent auditor and noted and documented in the city's comprehensive annual financial report for fiscal year 2016 and 2017, they made a note in their report to the City of Hemet, and they stated, the general fund has suffered significant reductions in fund balance by $2.3 million from operations. These conditions raise concerns about the financial condition of the city's governmental activities and the general fund and impact on future operations of the city. So what we have is we have a state audit report that notes significant budget challenges. That's from a state agency. We have an independent auditor that states the same thing. 2 different sources, 2 different individuals, or 2 different groups, completely independent and separate and apart from anything that the city staff has provided to the mayor and the city council. So based on the statements made by the state auditor, as well as the statements made by the city's independent auditor, there is an obvious budget issue that has been identified. The city has struggled to rectify this issue, and unless it takes serious action, it will utilize all reserves in just a few years. And this was illustrated in the financial model that we presented to the mayor and the city council on January 28, 2020. So maintaining the existing use of fund balance to continue operations, maintaining the existing status quo would provide for a very bad, insolvent City of Hemet in just a few years, and I should note that that was before COVID-19. The same budget issues continue to plague the city, which was clearly illustrated to the mayor and the city council on January 28, 2020, when staff presented the financial model for the city of Hemet. The state auditor has asked for another update as of May 26, 2020, and I will be providing that update to the state auditor, as well as providing a copy of that to the mayor and the city council, as well as to the community once we continue to move forward through this budget process. A key issue that I hear a number of residents and a number of community organizations and businesses cite is a key issue that the council and the community needs to be aware of. In 2016, the Hemet voters were asked to authorize a 1% additional sales tax measure to add and enhance levels of public safety services. While this was a noble concept, an effort to enhance its level of services, this tax was clearly conveyed as one that would provide additional and enhanced public safety programming. Given the statements by the state auditor and the city's independent auditor, its structural deficit meant one clear thing, and I can't emphasize this enough, and I'm a broken record when I talk to any community-based organizations or any members of the public. It meant that the city of Hemet could not afford the level of services that it provided back then. The city promoted the actions that it would take to add new and enhanced resources, yet the city was unable to provide for the status quo in 2015 and 2016 without the use of reserves. So this key issue, which was clearly conveyed in the budget documents and the CAFRs, was not part of the public discussion with respect to the 1% sales tax measure. This dilemma has manifested into a complex situation, the promising of additional personnel and upstaffing, while ignoring the fact that the city could not afford the level of service it provided in 2016. Moving forward, the council should recognize that this problem will lead to questions from the public about expectations versus reality. So these documents that are on the screen now are the actual letters from the independent auditor to the city of Hemet. So the second page where I've highlighted the purple section, that's verbatim what came from the independent auditor and the issues related to the structural deficit in the city of Hemet and the utilization of one-time revenues to continue ongoing expenditures for the city of Hemet. So as a summary for the fiscal year 2020-2021 proposed budget, it includes 2 positions slated for layoff, both due to the decrease in workload and also the decline in revenues. A new fire prevention officer position has been included, and firefighter floater positions have been included to eliminate the elimination of any personnel in the fire department. So with that action, we will be retaining all fire department personnel. Again, all existing personnel in the police and fire departments will remain with the city. All existing public works employees will remain employed. Total public safety expenditures total $39.9 million. The revised property tax revenues, delaying of HFFA 6% increase, and retirement incentives for HFFA members have allowed for retaining of all the fire department personnel. And finally, there has been unanimous support from the Measure U committee with respect to the proposed expenditures for Measure U, as well as the overall budget that is before you tonight. I want to add one final thing. I don't know if I mentioned it at the last discussion, but it's worth noting now. Based on and due to the fact of COVID-19 requiring or forcing us to redeploy our staff in different methods, whether it be telecommuting or other mechanisms, I made it a point to speak to every single operation, every single division, and every single department in the city of Hemet. My goal was to talk to every single employee and provide information on what the budget meant, the difficult decisions and the difficult recommendations that were included there, as well as gather input on how our staff was grappling with COVID-19. When I spoke to the fire department personnel, there was some key items that they conveyed that I